started. So we want to thank you for attending this session 331 titled Mormons and the Equal Rights Amendment. Before we begin, we ask that you silence your cell phones and that those attending will be respectful and attentive. It is the mission of Sunstone to host thoughtful and respectful dialogue. Please keep that in mind when engaging in the Q&A session. And then those who cannot abide by those guidelines should refrain from commenting and will be asked to leave should they not be able to do so. This session is being recorded, so with the Q&A, we ask that you actually come up to the front to ask your questions. And this is a panel discussion on the history of Mormons and the Equal Rights Amendment. It will feature discussion on the current state of the E.R.A. and how some Mormons are planning to push toward the enactment. The presenters are Mark Barnes, who is on the Ordained Women Executive Board, serving as Male Ally Chair and Treasurer. He's also on the Mormons for E.R.A. Board of Directors, and Mark is an attorney and educator. Chelsea Shields is a PhD candidate at Boston University in both cultural and biological anthropology. A Mormon feminist activist, she has led demonstrations, organizations, and lobbying efforts on behalf of religious gender equality. She is a TED Fellow and speaks regularly on evolution, religion, and gender. Anissa Rasheta is on the Mormons for E.R.A. Board of Directors. She is also a leader in the ASWAVE group and Arizona Chair for Care Advocacy, an international nonprofit. She's working on a bachelor's degree in sociology at ASU, and Anissa has been married for 11 years and is a mother of 3. So I'll turn the time over to them.
We want to thank you. We want to thank you guys for coming. We're really excited to have you, and I want to start out in a really fun way, get us all jazzed. So we're going to do an early 40-year-old, whatever, that's still young, rallying cry from the E.R.A. March. Last time it says, hey, hey, what do you say, ratify the E.R.A.? You guys are going to join with me, okay? Hey, hey, what do you say, ratify the E.R.A.? Woo! So a lot of you have questions right now, like, wait, isn't that a dead issue? Isn't that old? What is the E.R.A.? Haven't we passed that already? We're going to answer all of those questions, including how you can get involved, and we can all work together to pass this, okay? And change the world. So we're going to start out with a few introductions, and then we'll get you all ramped up.
Mark, real quick, I'm going to do a quick outline before Mark goes into introductions. All right, so how this is going to work today, we're going to introduce ourselves, kind of gives you why we're here and why we're on the board, and then we're going to talk about the Equal Rights Amendment, and then the last part, we're going to go into Mormons for E.R.A. and specifically in what our group is going to do. So we can start introducing.
Okay, so my name's Mark Barnes. As they mentioned, I've been involved in Ordained Women since its launch event in 2013. This is kind of like a dream come true to me. I brought 3 women with me because these are the reasons I'm here right now. So this is a picture of my grandmother, Beatrice Marchant. She fought for the E.R.A. She was the head of a group called the Equal Rights Coalition of Utah, which she started right after she left the Utah legislature and right after the E.R.A. was first passed by Congress. So big inspiration in my life. Down here is my mother, who was sort of my grandmother's right-hand person, I guess you would say, and she fought with my grandmother for ratification of the E.R.A. And over here in the corner, Tracy, if you want to stand up, this is my daughter, Tracy. So I am the son, the grandson, and the father of a Mormon feminist. And so the E.R.A. matters a lot to me. Chelsea and I have been talking about this for, I don't know, a year or so. I think maybe it was last Sunstone we talked a little bit about it, about setting up formally a group called Mormons for E.R.A. So people might say, well, why Mormons for E.R.A.? Why not just some generic name about the E.R.A.? One reason is I'm a Mormon. No matter how much I might try and be otherwise, I was born in this culture, raised in this culture, I think Mormon, I speak Mormon, I act Mormon. These are my people. But we'll talk a little bit more about history as we go along, but if it were not for Mormons, we would have equal rights written into the Constitution right now. And so I think it's only fitting that it's Mormons that play a crucial role in getting it there, clean up our mess. And so that's why I'm here as part of Mormons for E.R.A.
We're actually going to field questions through text. Where's the numbers? Right here. So if you have questions, text that number. And when it comes to the question time, we're going to have Tracy ask us the questions and make it go by a little smoother. So my name's Anissa Rasheta. I live in Arizona. So as wave is actually Arizona wave. So in case you were wondering what as is, that's Arizona. So I think this is the part where I show I'm tall enough to be a part of this ride. And I think it's funny. I think I need John DeLynn up here to show why that's funny, because I'm a lot shorter than him. So I think Chelsea brought me in because of my advocacy work with E.R.A. The last couple of years, I lobby in district and in DC for any bills that help empower women. And so she brought me in to work on this and the political side of things. And you know, when you think about certain countries and the women's status in there, it's cringeworthy. But you know, U.S. still have a ways to go, and I think if we're going to be the moral authority, we need to make women's rights permanent in the U.S. by putting it into the Constitution. And I think the ripple effect from that could help things like maternal mortality rate, equal pay, you know, maternal health rights, those kind of things that we still need to catch up with. And so that's why I'm here, because I believe that the Equal Rights Amendment is important and it's still relevant and it's needed. So I'm on this board for those reasons.
Okay, let me give you a brief history and we'll ask some questions for you guys. I mean, you really can't talk back, but you can like raise a hand, okay? So, this started for me, Mormons for E.R.A. started for me 2011. I read From Housewife to Heretic as an active Mormon woman and was infuriated by what I read about this history that I didn't know about the E.R.A., the politics, the specific individual stories of women and how church interactions happened as well as political interactions. I read the book and said, what can I do? I'm not the type of person that can see like a foreign activist film on like a Friday night, right? I watch Mission Impossible. Because I get done with the film, I said, we need to start an organization, right? So I immediately wrote the Equal Rights Amendment, just that. equalrightsamendment.org. I sent them an email and said, what are we doing about this? How do we solve this? And they actually wrote back. And not only did they write back, they said, you're a Mormon? The Mormons destroyed us 40 years ago. And you want to work with us? And they were so excited. They had me come speak at the Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, to talk about why religious bodies have an enormous impact on our political decision making and how we can strategize with them in order to make the types of decisions that we need for what we consider modern moral principles like equality, right? And how do we trump things like that versus obedience in a religious body? So we've been working for years with the E.R.A. National Task Force, National Council of Women's Organizations to try to start building this. But I just got busy. So I wasn't doing anything, and welcome into these two people who said, yeah, that's not enough. We're going to start this organization with or without you. So we've been working really hard this year to build a proper base. Everything we've learned from LDS Wave, everything we've learned from ordained women, take it all, build the right base to then get every single one of you involved with a job, autonomy, and a mission to go out and fight for us. So we're working really hard to get that base, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit of why I do this. So please raise your hand if you believed we already had an E.R.A. Okay. Raise your hand if you thought the issue was dead. There was nothing you could do about it. Raise your hand if you didn't even know what an E.R.A. was. Okay. Okay, and this is one of the reasons why we're doing this. In a national poll, bipartisan poll, we found that over 91% of Americans thought we already had one. And in fact, in all the constitutions that the U.S. has helped construct since 1950, we've forced other countries to put in an E.R.A. in their constitutions, okay? So those are a couple of the reasons we need to, and we'll talk about the E.R.A. specifically and Mormons for E.R.A. in a minute. I want to talk specifically about why I do this, okay? So So I want you to think of a pond right here, and we're dropping in a pebble, and that's how I feel when I'm trying to do activism. I believe this is right, therefore I want to act. And the wave is kind of small, the ripple's kind of small. But then I get all my friends together, and we say, come on guys, this is right, let's do it. And more pebbles go in, and guess what? The ripples expand. But what happens when you throw a log in there? How big are the ripples? Enormous. And that's because if you vote together as a voting bloc, if you can get an entire religion to vote in one direction, your political power is hard to beat. And that's what we learned the first time around. Okay? And so the way to distribute that voting bloc is to get people to care and to vote differently than just the way their church tells them. And how do we do that? And that's what we've been struggling with and working toward. And you know, my whole goal and mission in this, and I'll turn it over to these guys to really tell you about the E.R.A., is, you know, just because something's right doesn't mean you're effective, right? And just because you're effective doesn't mean you're right. And so we at Mormons for E.R.A. want to combine the two. And I told these guys before, I want it to like read on my gravestone that Mormons and most political scholars will agree that the E.R.A. would have passed save Mormon opposition. That's a pretty well-known statement that's in all the history books. And my goal is, you know, not my gravestone, but you know, all of our gravestones, to someday read, you know, the E.R.A. didn't pass because of Mormon opposition, but it finally passed because of Mormon proposition. Okay? And I'm here with you to make that happen. Okay? In a minute. Okay, Mark.
Okay. Short announcement I was just handed. It says remind people that there will be food trucks outside for lunch. So I'll also remind you that we're having a feminist E.R.A. lunch downstairs that you're welcome to attend if you would like to attend lunch with us afterwards. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about history. I have just a very few minutes. I can't cover all of E.R.A. history in that time. So what I'm going to do is take a few examples of women who were involved in the fight for E.R.A. and you can just imagine that the same type of example happened thousands and thousands of times. But first of all, what are we talking about? Pretty innocuous language. So in 2013, Congresswoman Maloney from New York, she introduces E.R.A. Into Congress every year, introduced a bill, and this is called the new E.R.A., but I love it because it turns out to be the new era. So, sorry this is small, you can't see it, but I'll read it to you.
It's a sign!
So the language here says, women shall have equal rights in the United States and every place subject to its jurisdiction. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. So this very, very simple, basic language. If you believe in equality, I don't know how you can argue with the Equal Rights Amendment. So I want to tell you just a short few examples of women who fought for the E.R.A. I mentioned before, this is my grandmother, Beatrice Martian.
Here's my take the mic. Take it with you.
Don't get mad at me if I don't, right? Okay. So she, in 1968, ran for the Utah State Legislature. And I was a 9-year-old kid at that time, and we handed out these handbills in her neighborhood. I remember going door to door. So she served 2 terms, so she didn't run again in 1972. In March, I think it was March 22nd, 1972, Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment. And that was her cause. And I mentioned she started an organization here in Utah to try and get Utah to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. When she started, there was almost no opposition. Members of the church thought it was great. It looked like it was just going to go through. State after state after state was ratifying. All of a sudden, about 3 years into it, the church kicked in with opposition and things really got difficult. And so she was one of the leaders here in Utah, among many, fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment. As I mentioned, this is my mother over here, probably the person that's had the biggest influence on my life and who I am. My mother was all about equality, and she fought as long and hard as she could for the Equal Rights Amendment. Some things that are interesting, my Aunt Renee, who was not here and in fact didn't even know that my grandmother was working on the Equal Rights Amendment, she lived in Las Vegas, and she was contacted by her bishop one day and said, "Come in for an interview, I need to talk to you." So she goes into her bishop's office, and he said, "First of all, I need to read you this statement. And it's a statement about how the church isn't involved in politics, and we don't, do any of that stuff. Don't tell the IRS." And then they said, "We want you to go, you're being called to join a group, and it's called Quest for Government Equality. And I'm going to give them your name, and they'll contact you." And within a couple of days, she had a phone call from some guy who said, "Oh, I understand, Sister Rampton, you've been called to be part of Quest for Government Equality." And she said, "Well, I don't really know much about it, but okay." And she was kind of under the impression it was an educational thing because she was an educator. So she clues in quickly that no, this is an anti-E.R.A. thing, and she knows nothing about the E.R.A. And so she took a trip down to a local organization that was pro-E.R.A., and they told her what the language was, and she thought that sounded pretty good. And so she started asking questions. And in the end, she turned down the calling, and she ended up becoming an E.R.A. activist herself. So that type of story happened again and again and again throughout the church. So I have should have brought it over here with me, a quote I wanted to read. So this is a woman named Betty W. Johnson, and in March she published a blog post. She has her own blog. And it really touched me when I read this, because she, like my aunt, was one of the people who had been contacted to fight against the Equal Rights Amendment. And she did, and now she feels bad about it. So this is just one paragraph in her blog post, but it says, "I've been wanting to get this off my chest for a long time. When I consented to the use of my name in the signing of a blanket opposition statement and mailing to government officials, when I stepped onto the bus headed for the Capitol building in Phoenix, Arizona for an anti-E.R.A. rally, I was wrong. When I was tutored not to let anyone know that I belonged to a concerted, powerful, church-sponsored campaign to defeat the IRA, I agreed to that deceit. I was wrong. Let me repeat, I was wrong." So we all know about Prop 8. We all know the things that happened during Prop 8. E.R.A. was the precursor to that. The same type of tactics were used. And so, like I said before, I feel obligated here because we made the mess. It's time we come in and clean it up. It's time we finally have equality in our Constitution.
All right, I'm going to talk about currently what the Equal Rights Amendment. First, I want to say, the Equal Rights Amendment is amending the Constitution. It would be the 28th Amendment. That happens by getting 2/3 of Congress to pass and 3/4 of states to vote. So we're 3 states shy. There's 2 strategies, and there is hope. There's momentum. We've got Hillary running soon. It could be on her platform. We also have the movie about suffrage coming in October, so that it's in the limelight right now, and we want to use this momentum. So there is hope, and there's 2 strategies which Chelsea will go into. We can either get a bill passed to lift the deadline, because it was unconstitutional that this particular amendment had a 10-year deadline, or we could start over with this new era, new E.R.A. So, hold on a second. I want to say why it's still relevant, why we still need the E.R.A., because a lot of people think, well, we're already equal. We have the 14th Amendment or Civil Rights Act, but I have a few cases and examples of why it is still needed. I mean, obviously we know about that women don't get the same pay, or we have, maternal health discrimination or other jobs, and this is actually going to raise it and make the scrutiny level and how that's judged in court cases higher than it would otherwise, and give it a higher level of scrutiny in these discrimination cases. Because bills and acts and laws can be repealed, they can